Om te weten te komen hoe westerlingen haar geboorteland Indonesië zien, reist de actrice Madhur Jafferty met ze mee. Zijn de toeristen een bedreiging voor de Indonesische cultuur of gaat er achter de rituelen die ze te zien krijgen ook iets anders schuil?
I left India when I was 20 to make my way as an actress, first in London and then here in New York. My husband, violinist Sanford Allen, is American. I've lived in America for the last 30 years, and in some ways I suppose I've become quite westernized. But at my core, I remain Indian. That base, I feel, will never change.
Now, let me tell you that this...
At other times, I feel that I'm not completely Indian and not completely Western, and that something is always missing.
Less decadent, I guess. More cucumbers.
More cucumbers. Healthier.
Madhur, tell us about your trip to Indonesia.
Well, I'm so associated with food and spices, and I realized that I don't really know the Spice Islands where the spices originated. And my thought was that I was raised in India. India was a colony when I was born, and we were subjected to, well, all kinds of influences, shall we say. I went to a school that was segregated with Indians on one side, sort of English people on the other. And I wondered...
A few girls with the right connections were moved from my Indian class to the English class. They were considered good enough to be Westerners. I was very torn and hurt. But India wasn't the only colony that suffered.
I wondered how, in the Spice Islands, where the spices originated, where all the Westerners were rushing to in the 16th, 17th centuries, how their lives were affected and how they changed. And here, we know the Westerners made a lot of money out of it, but how did the Indonesians survive?
I flew to the other side of the world, to Bali. Here I joined the Island Explorer, a luxury catamaran which can go into very shallow waters and reach the remoter islands of Nusa Tenggara in the east of Indonesia. I'll be in this country for 3 weeks. Most of the people on this floating hotel are Westerners. Aside from eating well, they may surf, scuba dive, fish, snorkel, and go ashore to meet the islanders. It is this last part that I'm most interested in. I first want to see Indonesia through the passengers' eyes. I want to watch them watching the Indonesians.
I chose this boat specifically because I was aware I thought I wanted to come to Indonesia for several years.
Colors are amazing. Related to defending the village.
When I saw this, it appealed. It looked like a way to see some of the country off the beaten track. Exotic.
On the face of it, it was entertainment. Even though everyone was laughing, ancient fears seemed not far below the surface. Then I remembered that as we had landed, we had been greeted at the beach with a ceremonial palm cigar and palm wine.
Nice.
The villagers were welcoming us, but they were also making sure that we were not carrying some evil. Old mistrust was present, even though in ritual form.
It's good, it's really good. It's the next one.
On our side, I noticed that what with our preoccupation with hygiene, no one really wanted to sip from the same bowl of wine or take a puff from a common cigar.
Very nice, yes. Thank you.
For the man, the palm wine, please. It's a real palm wine.
Oh, delicious.
The cruise organizers called this a day of brotherhood.
Yeah.
This is fresh palm wine. Nothing wrong with that.
When I was young, I used to be scared stiff of banyan trees because I was told spirits lived in them. This banyan tree has spirits too, they say. It's sacred. Indonesians believe there are spirits in the trees, in rocks, spirits in all nature. That is why the church was built in the shade of the banyan tree. When this village on the island of Flores was converted to Christianity, animism, the belief in spirits, remained. Christianity I found here was different. It was Eastern Christianity. In Western Christianity, man is paramount. It is the good of man, the brotherhood of man, kindness towards men that are stressed. In the Eastern Christianity of Indonesia, the survival and welfare of nature is as important as that of man. Each is dependent on the other. Isn't that what the green movement is all about? I wondered what my fellow passengers felt.
Somebody said it went on until 6 o'clock or something.
It was supposed to be a 3-hour service, that's all I know.
Yeah. In a way, I'm sorry I didn't stay longer, but but it was 3 hours. It was going to be a long. You didn't stay to the end, obviously. No, we sailed, of course, long before that.
For the Westerner, even on holiday, time is money. And money speaks.
One, two, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
After the bargain comes the celebration. I get caught up in the dance, but at the back of my mind, I know that this and many of the other events have been specially organized for us. This causes me some worry. I have been watching the passengers on the ship for the past 8 days. Some of them have come for the sun and the sand. Others have come looking for the exotic. I never know what exotic means. Quite a few of the others seem to be searching for a fading, ancient way of life. It's strange, isn't it, that as we tourists go on shore, we seem to change just what we are seeking? So far, I've been on the edge of the Spice Islands, and I've looked at this country through the eyes of Westerners. Now I'm taking off on my own for the Moluccas, the Spice Islands to the north, to find what Indonesians think of themselves. I want to discover the resilient heart of Indonesia. I want to dig a little deeper. I won't be the first person to dig in these islands. For the West, they have been a veritable gold mine. The Spanish had discovered America, and to keep the peace, a 16th century pope divided the world down the Atlantic. He allowed the Spanish to keep the western half and very generously awarded the eastern heathen lands to the Portuguese. The pope sanctioned the exploitation of one half of the world by the other, dividing it forever into a superior west and an inferior east. To get all the way to the Spice Islands, the Portuguese had first to develop the technology that would get them there: navigation, bigger ships, and better armaments. All this would be paid for by the cloves that grew on this volcanic island, Ternate, only 5 miles across. I remember in school reading about the Pope dividing up the undiscovered world into 2 parts. Undiscovered by whom? I was furious. These people had been here for centuries. My forefathers had been in India for centuries. I talked to the Sultan of Ternate about this.
When the Portuguese reached Ternate, we accept them as a good trader, of course. We also want to make money. They also want to make profit on it. And by, they ask permission to build godowns, just to store their spice. What happens then is that because of this spice gives more and more profit, it's much more profitable than other stuff, their godowns, they change it, becomes a fort. They do not store only the spice in there, they buy it from us, but they also store their guns. They put their men there, armed forces, and then we witness the birth of a colonial system which the world afterwards knows. They want to colonize us. They want to dictate what we can do and what we cannot do. So then start the troubles. When they want to try to colonize us, this trouble starts, and we make a fight with them. And one of the sultans, named Sultan Babullah, drove them away from here. And then come the Dutch. They are the same like the Portuguese. They also want to colonize us. And we fight also with them.
And this is what they were all after, cloves. This was a very, very expensive commodity. When Drake came here, I believe he sold his cloves for 2,500 times their value when he got back to England. They were used as medicine. In fact, if you went to see the Chinese emperor, you had to suck these because otherwise your breath was not tolerable to him. And in England, they were also sold as aphrodisiacs, perhaps because they look somewhat phallic, I think. So what did you do to the Dutch to make them leave Ternate?
Well, we give them a very hard time.
In order to keep their monopoly, the Dutch cut down nearly all the clove trees in the 17th century, completely destroying the sole source of income for the island. I asked the Sultan what belief sustained the people through this devastation.
This objective world is not stable. It changes. It changes all the time. It changes all the time. So what is very important for us is to understand that immaterial world. That is the most powerful power which a man could use to make this material world stable.
If there is an Eastern Christianity in Indonesia, there's also an Eastern Islam. This procession is attended by both Muslim and Christian leaders. Problems between these two religions, so blatant elsewhere, seem to have been avoided here. I was very impressed by the Sultan. He had obviously absorbed a lot from the West, but he had seamlessly made it Eastern, unlike me. On the last evening of the fast of Ramadan, just as the faithful were gathering for prayer, an eerie thing happened. I had gone to look at an old Portuguese fort. My first thought was naked panic. It was like an atom bomb. The Sultan had said to me that we can affect the universe by our anger, by our disharmony. I just had a quarrel with the director. Is that what had caused the eruption? Did we do this? Like me, everyone was scared. Would the lava and ashes engulf the town as they had done once before? As it happened, the wind blew the ashes away to the sea, and the lava flowed on the other side of the mountain. No one was hurt. When the volcano went off, it was absolutely terrifying. Now, what is the significance of the volcano for you?
You see, we believe that there is a close communication between this mountain and the life of people here. So every time when there is an imbalances in the life, our society, in the adat especially, then there will always be a sign that by interrupting, you see, then
the volcano interrupts you to tell you, watch out?
Watch out. There is something not good.
The next day, this extraordinary man asked me to accompany him on another mission to a neighboring island, Halmahera. He explained he was head of Adat, the traditional law which originated in ancient animism. It's not easy to understand this, and even harder to explain.
Everybody knows what to do, and everybody knows what is not to do. I believe that I do things wrong, I might hurt you, and that is not good. And so also you, if you keep believing this philosophy, if you start something wrong in a society, then you might hurt somebody or you might hurt the society, and that is not good also. Now, this kind of belief, if only the Western people could follow, I think we can create the world which is more suitable for mankind.
Adat is based on the belief in the duality of all things. It is as if you existed within me as well as outside me. So if I hurt you, I would hurt myself. When ancestors handed down the Adat law, they knew what was good for their society, both in their own time and in the future. Adat is thus both a gift and a command. With this belief, the islanders don't need policemen. They have built-in controls. The Sultan acts as a kind of ombudsman. The people come to him with their problems. This villager from a distant mountain is reporting a mysterious illness that is affecting his neighbors. He asks the Sultan for aid.
We live not what do you call it, hastily. We do everything according to what we need, like the Western people, because they happens to be to know the machines and to make industrial progress, without realizing that these machines brings much more misery than welfare. You see, with their machine now, where are they now? They are still seeking something which can bring them a feeling of peace with their machines. Now, if they stick to this philosophy, the you and I philosophy, with their machine, using not only for their wealthy, but using for the wealthy of mankind, that is another factor which can create the Garden of Eden.
I took a boat and headed for Ambon, the capital of the Moluccas. The Sultan of Ternate had drawn such strength from the certainties of Adat. The Western dress had concealed a visionary Eastern man. I was beginning to understand how this culture could withstand so many incursions and yet stay true to itself. Since very early times, Hindus, Arabs and Chinese had traded peacefully for spices in Ambon. Then came the Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch and English. They didn't just want to trade, they wanted to control and monopolize. The Dutch, having destroyed the clove trees in Ternate, calmly planted new saplings here. The saddest part of colonialism for me has been the ability of a foreign power to arrange and rearrange the lives of the local people at will. During World War II, the Japanese took Ambon from the Dutch and turned this harbor into a naval base. The base needed brothels. The girls were forcibly taken from local families. Then, in 1944, the Americans bombed the Japanese and flattened the city. Throughout this tragic history, Adat remained. The spirit stood firm. On the neighboring island of Saparua, I met someone who would peel away another layer for me, Helena Tanasale.
You've gone through such hard times. It's not just the Dutch. There were the Portuguese and the Spaniards who've attacked this area and ruled it for a very long time.
Yeah.
How have you managed to survive?
Well, I think the Pela relationship is a lot to do with that. Pela relationship is the relationship between two villages. Haria village is a Christian village, and it has a relationship in Pela relationship with the Sirisori.
Pela was my next discovery. The Pela bonding was forged in ancient times between warring villages. Such pacts also helped them to deal with the Dutch. In 1817, Patimura, the Malaccan hero who came from Helena's Christian village, joined forces with a Muslim village. Together, they attacked the Dutch fort and killed most of the inhabitants. But within days, the Dutch tracked down the rebels and hanged them in Ambon. It is the bond between these two villages that they are now planning to renew. The renewing event is called a Pela warming. The Christians and Muslims sit on either side of the veranda. The Pela bond is very strong. It is sealed in blood. It cannot be broken.
Beta tetap juga orang Haria dan tetap punya pela buat pela-pela semua.
Helena Thanasale reminds this meeting of the joint villages of the last Pela warming. Among many mutually beneficial activities, the Muslims had helped the Christians build a church, and how her village was helping to rebuild the mosque.
Sepanjang hayat di kandung badan.
A Muslim and a Christian. I was watching spellbound, thinking of Beirut. I was almost reluctant to take the small plane further south to the volcanic Banda Islands, even though everyone described them to me as paradise. For the Dutch, Banda was the jewel in their crown. It is here that they lived with great style, in plantation houses with marble floors and delft-tiled window ledges. They drank the finest European wines in the evenings and sauntered off to costume balls and banquets. It was here, at this very place, that with the help of their Japanese mercenaries, the Dutch executed 40 local headmen, burnt their villages, and killed nearly all of the 15,000 people. Why?
I had a little nut tree, and nothing would it bear, save a silver nutmeg and a golden pear. The King of Spain's daughter came to visit me, all for the sake of my little nut tree.
This is a young nutmeg tree.
How old is it?
It's 10 years.
10 years?
Yes.
And how old can they get?
The nut,
The trees?
the trees, 100 years.
100 years?
Yes, 100 years, 200 years.
This is the nutmeg.
Yes, it's a nutmeg.
It's supposed to be one of nature's best packaging jobs.
Yes.
Now this is the fruit,
The fruit,
on
yes.
the outside. The red is the
The
maize. And this is the
This is
nut,
nut.
inside which
yes.
is the nutmeg.
This is nutmeg, yes.
And this is supposed to be one of the best, in fact, the
Yes.
best nutmeg in the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
And originally it was just the Banda
Yes, yes,
Islands that
yes,
had the
yes,
nutmeg.
Yes.
This is Peter Vandenbroek by Frans Hals. This is his descendant,
The people of I don't like the Dutch.
Willem Vandenbroek.
Because first here in Banda was the Portuguese here. It was in 915. And after that was the Dutch in 1612.
His ancestor in the portrait made a great fortune here, but now things have changed. A bell used to call 400 slaves to work. Now there are only 6 workers to harvest the nutmeg and tend the old family graves. The old quarters behind the plantation house reminded me of the slave quarters in America's deep south. Once the West was clawing to get at the nutmegs, but the value of nutmegs has plummeted. The Bandanese people are now free, but they're being forced to woo the West back as tourists. One man who is concerned about their predicament is Banda's leading citizen, Des Alwi.
What I'm trying to do is, we are still a bit minus. That means that we have bad weather, the people cannot fish, and then when there's no harvest of the nutmeg, so there's no earning. It doesn't mean a special period of the year, but the things that they couldn't earn. So what we need is to bring in tourism. Tourism means that if we just fill in the gap, then we're all right, then we're happy people. We don't need to be rich, but we should have enough to eat and send children to school and you know, have a decent house.
Their annual boat race is a memorial to the past. This is a war canoe manned by 37 warriors. But I do feel that something's not quite right. Oh, everybody's happy, but I sense an element of staging. Cultural confusion I'd started with, which I'd seen so successfully resolved in Ternate and Saparua, seemed to present itself again here. Deep spiritual traditions that I'd witnessed on some of the other islands can't be wished into place. Of course, one must remember that almost all the inhabitants here were wiped out by the Dutch and replaced by outsiders. There's a lot of fun on the surface, but for me there's a poignancy in the rituals and in Banda itself. But Banda did hold a special surprise for me. I came face to face with myself 20 years ago. I feel half Eastern and half Western. She is literally so, with a German mother and an Indonesian father. Her name is Tamalia Ali Shabana.
You know, Tamalia, when I came to Indonesia, I really came to find out how the East and West had affected each other here. And I found that for Indonesia, there seemed to be so many Wests. The Indians came here, the Arabs came here, Islam came here, all came from the West. And of course, then the Europeans came. And there had been so many layers of influence, and Indonesia seems to have put on all these different layers. And yet, underneath it all, there is something that's very fundamentally Indonesian. There seems to be, I think, a very strong support system. Now, I've seen some of it in the Pela, which is the bonding of the villages. I've seen some of it in the Adat, which is the customary law. You, of course, live here. You're a lawyer. You've left Jakarta, and you're out here in remote Banda. Now, what are you doing here? Have you found out anything that you can enlighten me about?
What strikes me most is that we've had
500 years nearly of Western influence in every field, in the language, in the law, in the political institutions, in the technology, every field. And we have to take and take and take. It leaves one feeling so poor. And you question your worth and your identity. And I think people here are torn because they've had to give up so many things, you know? So many things of their culture and their beliefs. And they have to, if we want not always to be forever a third-class country, and we want to take our place among the nations of the 20th century. And I think this is something that affects everyone, not just sultans and writers and lawyers, but every person, every ordinary person that's come in contact with Western technology, has had some education. It affects everyone. And the question is how we meet this challenge, and I don't know what the answer is. But I went to Seram, and I think perhaps I found one thread to part of this answer. And I'd like to take you there.
Now what happens is that? Thank you.
All right. Okay, we're here. Let's go.
Oh my God.
Okay. Why don't you take the top back? Because you're a little bit clumsy.
A lot of mosquitoes.
Oh, don't worry, I brought a mosquito net.
You're carrying a mosquito net?
Well, yes. Mosquito net.
You always carry a mosquito net?
One thing about me that I know is Western is that I need my creature comforts, my soft bed and my clean toilet. This is no luxury cruiser. It's a local island ferry and we are on a rough overnight trip. There are no complaints from my fellow passengers. Probably no mosquitoes out there in the open. The dawn is beautiful. Hard bunks, mosquitoes are all forgotten.
Right, and you can see Saunulu, which is where the little church, you see the white church with the strangler fig next to it?
One? Yeah.
Yeah, the Christian village. And just next to it is here.
This is Seram. Moluccans believe that they all originated here, and it is here they will return when they die. There are few roads. It seems mysterious and impenetrable. Tamalia practiced Western law in Jakarta, but after a trip to Seram to study traditional Adat law, she felt dissatisfied.
Madhur, there. See? There's the Adat house. And the Raja
Like me, she
and
had
his wife,
many
they're
questions.
standing in front.
Perhaps Western values did not provide all the answers for us. She took me to Seram to show me what she'd found there.
What does he say? I am the king from Manusela.
One.
And he says, I ask your forgiveness, I give you my greetings, but you cannot come in because his people are out working in the fields, and for us to come in there must be more than one Adat elder. Otherwise we would be breaking the Adat. and our film will be empty.
I see,
Yeah.
I see.
So
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
afraid
you.
we won't be able to go in after
Yes.
all.
We don't want an empty film.
No. And now here we have the Adat house. And when people are in trouble or if they're sick, yeah, then they come here. And the Adat elders, like the Rajatana, they will beat the tifa drums and they will call the spirits of the ancestors. Because here everything has a spirit. Every stone, every tree, the mountains, they have spirits. But most important are the spirits of the ancestors. And when a person is in trouble or sick, go to the Adat house and you beat the tifa drum and they call the spirits of the ancestors.
How do they come?
And in this particular house, because it's different in different Adat houses, the spirit of the ancestor will come in the form of a white bird, which will fly in through the window. And then it sees if the petitioner has a pure heart. If not, the bird leaves again. Now the little house at the side is where they keep the skulls of the ancestors. For us, death is so separate from life. But here it is, life and death are more integrated, yeah?
And nature as well. Trees, mountains, the sea.
But the more secret place, I mean, that's even further than this Adat house, is to the mountains. Somewhere here, there is an invisible mountain, and that is Nunusaku, which was the first mountain, the first piece of land that was supposed to have risen out of the sea, where the first people were. And we don't know exactly where it is, only certain initiated people, so it's an invisible mountain. So you see, what is important is invisible.
Tamalia told me that the invisible mountain rose out of the sea as a volcano in primeval times. This reminded me of the other volcano and how its eruption was considered a sign of disharmony. What had impressed me was not just the Indonesians' desire for harmony, but the firmly rooted system set up to achieve it in everyday life. I'll never forget the Sultan's words. When the volcano speaks, we should listen. As a confused Eastern Westerner, even I saw hope in this. When the volcanoes speak, perhaps we should all listen. Even here, in the streets of New York.